Well, I'm very happy to be the academic representative in this morning session and share some thoughts and insights about market trends and sustainability implications. And I have some co-authors on this work that we've been doing for a few years. And really coming from academia, our focus is to look beyond individual industries and individual companies, more kind of what general trends can we see. So when I say we, unlike previous speakers, right, I don't have a company that I envision we as a society. And then I'm going to talk about the firm as kind of the proverbial firm in a specific industry. So sustainability, right, big buzzword. So I'm going to borrow the definition of sustainability from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Sounds like a desirable outcome for the society, right? And if we take that abstract notion to manufacturing and sourcing, that is going to fall into three areas. So the economy, the society, and the environment. So the economic sustainability is about the well-being of the firm, right? So things like generating sales and profits, contributing to local economy, driving innovation, the well-being of the firm. Then there is the well-being of the society, good working conditions, fair wages, respecting human rights and so forth. And then the environment, the well-being of the planet and the resources that we have. What I want to emphasize with this picture is sustainability is not a binary endeavor. It is a whole spectrum of initiatives, product attributes that we can think of falling within this framework. So it is a great framework that naturally lends to the operations principles that we know of continuous improvement, of supply chain coordination, and so forth. Typically, when we look at supply chain coordination, we look at just the economic side, so the incentives of all supply chain partners, right? The society and the environment don't have a seat on the table. So if we try to look at this whole environment as a bigger supply chain, we realize the economy is very well represented, but not the society and the environment. Unfortunately, there are parts of the world where workers are happy to go and work for literally a cent, and that's not necessarily a desirable outcome for society. The environment, the earth can't really come and say, well, I'm done with your trash, thank you very much, I'm going for my outside option, right? At least not directly, not in real time. It takes time for that climate change to build in. So if we want the interests of society and the environment to be represented when we talk about supply chain coordination in this broader sense, we need to have a player whose interests are aligned. And I'm going to argue that that's going to come from the consumer. There's an alternative view. Well, let's just ban all these bad practices, right? But that's not the reality, at least in this country, and actually in countries where that's a popular opinion, we don't see a fantastic outcomes either. So in France, where they ban a lot of single-use plastics and you have to recycle, we still see just the problem just pushed away further from France. We don't really see it solved. So I'm going to be talking about the market trends that come from the consumer. Just to make it a little bit more concrete, and I'm going to stay away from food. We had a fantastic talks about food. So a couple of other industries I want to talk about, the fast fashion. And what's interesting with these couple of industries is fantastic economic growth success stories, right? Fast fashion exploded. It's great for business. Consumers are buying more and more on a more frequent basis, spending more money. A lot of growth in profits. And then we look at the environmental side. What we see is average number a person wears an item before tossing it 7. 7. I mean, I'm a few years out of the target demographic for fast fashion, but I don't remember any point in my life where that was an acceptable outcome. So just when we think about the waste, and we're supply chain experts, right? We know that there is waste at the material level, at the work in progress, and then finally at the finished product. So if we go from just having 2 fashion seasons per year to 52, that cycle of waste and trying to match in demand and supply repeats every week. The amount of waste that generates is tremendous. On the societal side, we've probably all heard about the working conditions of garment workers in developing countries, especially in places like Bangladesh, in India. And let me tell you, even in Eastern Europe, that is a big problem as well. So I have here the negative impact of the apparel industry, so even beyond just fast fashion, resource depletion, climate change. It's pretty much any aspect of the environment is negatively affected by the trends in the fast fashion. Just to show you how the economic interest can go directly against the interests of the society, the human rights of those garment workers, and the environment. And the problem is huge. So fast fashion is the second most polluting industry after oil. And despite what might make the news and what companies might promote, actually, still most of that waste ends up in landfill. And there is just 1% recycling into new garments. So a lot of the waste just ends up in there. The other big offender, consumer electronics. So ever since PCs and mobile phones were introduced, the life cycle on the market of products has been getting shorter and shorter. So electronics used to be designed to last 40 years. Now they're in the market for, on average, 4 or 5. So looking at the product life cycle from concept to development, launch, and so forth, and then ultimately end of life, now with that shorter life cycle on the market, that makes the emphasis on end of life much, much larger. So we need to think what is going to happen with these products at the end of life stage. We have a lot more product introductions, right? So the new generation of every type of phone, the new generation of every type of laptop, that creates many more of these cycles of introducing product on the market, growth, maturity, and ultimately decline. So coordinating the market life cycle with the product life cycle is becoming much more complex because we just have many more products nowadays than we used to have 10 or 20 years ago. E-waste, also you've probably heard at how much e-waste there is, and it's all pretty much ending up at landfills and oceans and so forth. What I want to emphasize with electronic e-waste relative to the fast fashion industry is e-waste also has direct and indirect impact on health impact, right? So it's not biodegradable, the pollution, we breathe it, we eat it, there are a lot of impacts. So on the surface, it seems like it's a desirable outcome to reduce this waste, but because it's very hard to quantify, it's very hard to put dollar amount on that impact, it's hard to bring that into the equation of our benefits and costs of having the electronic consumption. E-waste is increasing pretty much exponentially, and even if we just stop producing any electronic waste this day, we are still going to have a ton of waste that's already there that we don't know what to do with it, and we keep just generating more and more. So with these two examples of industries, very successful profit-wise, but becoming the antonym of sustainability. And I want to use that to motivate why we have the movement towards the circular economy. So taking the model from we produce, we consume, we throw away, adding another stage. What do we do after we throw it away? We go back to designing the processes and the manufacturing. So after the end of life, as much as possible can go again into input materials and just use as much as we can. To do that, we need reverse flows. We need to build the infrastructure and the industrial scale to be able to just take that product. We need to find ways to have it from the consumer. It's surprising how many people don't know how to properly dispose of electronics and just throw it in the regular trash. And if you do that, it's never going to end up with useful end-of-life use for any of that electronic. So that's the first step, reverse flow. To accommodate the reverse flow, we need to rethink the whole design of processes. We need more modular architectures, more standardized components. There are many reasons why those are not economically desirable, right? If all the electronics start to have the same components, that's going to generate issues with competitors, right? And what you can put in each electronic. So we are slowly moving towards a circular economy and trying to find ways, but it is difficult. It is difficult because if we want to have sustainable initiatives, and those could be either on the social side, so improving the worker conditions, or the environmental side with circular economy, we require upfront investment. Make sense? But that investment is not just writing a check. It's not just a dollar amount that you know, okay, I'm going to discuss with my stakeholder, we agree, we're going to spend that much money, great. No, these are new initiatives. You have to reach new societies, potentially in developing countries. You have to invest new technologies for recycling, upcycling, and so forth. So upfront, you don't even know how expensive it's going to be. You don't know how long it's going to take. So it's a very difficult conversation with stakeholders to sign in on that. On the societal side, so let's take Bangladesh. $5 per day is a pretty good salary in Bangladesh, okay? So you take the output of a worker in Bangladesh, let's say 5 units, just for simplicity. You increase the price of the product by $1. So that goes to the worker, and we are done. Yeah? We are subsidizing the workers. I'm happy with that. But it's not so easy, right? Even if you increase the price by $1, having the infrastructure to reach the end worker, there is a whole process, there is a whole supply chain that we need to work out how to achieve that. So building the infrastructure for any sustainable initiatives to have a meaningful impact is challenging. Similarly, on the environmental side, we still don't know how to recycle most electronic waste. Maybe there is a way, maybe there isn't. How expensive it is to find if there is a way, we don't know. So in both of these cases, if we want to pursue any of these sustainability initiatives, we need leadership commitment, and we need those initiatives to be part of the strategic goals. The time scale for such initiatives is, as was previously mentioned, on the order of decades, right? So it's much longer than the typical tenure of an executive. And then if we talk about going into the location where the workers are in different parts of the world, right? Having to interact with governing bodies in those parts of the world, that presents its own challenges. And for geopolitical reasons, might even be undesirable. So that is just setting up the sustainability initiative. And once we have it set up, we also have ongoing challenges and ongoing costs, right? Okay, we found a way to subsidize our workers in Bangladesh. Great. So that comes with increased costs because we're paying them more. We also need to monitor, make sure, the money reaches them. We have to test for product safety if we want to increase their working conditions, regularly maintain the facilities, and so forth. So that is going to be an ongoing cost on our balance sheet in the firm. For the environment, if we are adding processes for recycling and upcycling, that is also going to increase cost, right? It's one more part of the manufacturing process. The monitoring and engagement, again, a cost that's very hard to quantify, that is very labor intensive at the highest level, at the leadership of the company. And then the interaction with governing bodies is also a recurring interaction, right? So especially in parts of the world where maybe the political climate is not that stable, it becomes difficult to engage in the field. So a lot of this starting to sound almost like development work, right? We want to help certain parts of the world. And we all know that the skill sets of people who work in NGOs that do that kind of work and the skill sets of executives in the big companies are very different. And that collaboration is really an opportunity to make that meaningful change. With all these challenges, it's really not surprising why companies are not jumping at just trying to do as many sustainable initiatives as possible, right? Because how you treat your workers, how you manufacture, and what you do with your end product is not directly visible to the consumer. So it's very hard to directly get the additional revenue from consumer for those practices. And then a lot of the out of sight, out of mind mentality. Yeah, at some point we all agree we want to treat the workers fairly, and then people move on, right? So that is the big, well, I call it the curse of sustainability. It's something that we all agree in principle, but because it's not visible to the consumer and it's not directly generating revenue, it's easy to overlook. Sustainability labels are designed to precisely fill in that gap, to make sustainable practices and attributes visible to the consumer. Again, very good principle. Definitely we need those labels, otherwise it's basically cheap talk. You go on the website of any firm, and nowadays there is going to be a big section on sustainability and what they do. And it's very, very difficult for consumers to know how credible those statements are. Right? We cannot play journalist and find out what happens in Bangladesh or what happens at landfill locations. So these labels are important. As of now, there are just too many labels with very different standards and even inconsistent application of standards across labels as well. So a lot more work needs to be done if these labels for sustainable practices are going to be meaningful for consumers. The consumer is demanding change. So as much as fast fashion and electronic consumption are very economic success stories of growth, more and more consumers are starting to favor things like helping low-paid workers, reducing negative impact on the environment as attributes of companies' operation, even more important than reducing prices and getting discounts. So this is for the fashion brands, where arguably prices are pretty important. Consumers are very price sensitive. So we are starting to see that change. We are starting to see the counter movement to fast fashion. It's called slow fashion, right? Where clothes are more durable, they last longer, and the consumer doesn't buy as many, so they reuse them. How novel is that, right? To wear your clothes more than 7 times. And then we are seeing apparel industries also trying to affect the working conditions of their workers. So Patagonia has made the news a lot, right, for really going in the field in Bangladesh and helping those workers. And it turns out sometimes it's not money what they need. So when they gave the money, the workers, they decided to build a daycare because most of those workers are women. And they were taking their kids in the factory for the whole day. So when given the money, they actually wanted to build a daycare. So just to show you that we really, if you want to have a meaningful change, we need to understand the needs of those people. We cannot just send a check. With the customers now demanding a change, we are seeing a switch from what I call the old product paradigm. where a product is evaluated based on observable characteristics. So for sportswear, that's like durability, functionality, comfort, identity and recognition. So a lot of different attributes that different people value more than others. With the new product paradigm, now the customer also cares about the sustainable attributes, how the firm is treating its workers, what they're doing with the end-of-life product. So to give you an example, we can take a fleece, right? That fleece, traditionally, consumers just evaluated based on traditional quality, let's say durability. And now there is a whole other quality dimension, which is the sustainable quality. For example, use of recycled material. So that sustainable quality could be binary. Is the product fair trade or not? Or it could be a continuous. What fraction of the material used is recycled? So a firm can take that traditional fleece and now make it with recycled material. When they do that, the traditional quality, the durability could stay the same if recycled material allows. If you have constraints from the recycled material, the durability could go down if that recycled material is just not very durable. Or the durability could actually go up if through the innovation of using recycled material, we actually find ways, that's the beautiful thing, if we find ways to actually improve durability as well, then we are in a win-win situation. So to make product line decisions, what products to develop and put on the market, now companies are facing multidimensional quality. Some of those are coming from the traditional features, like durability, and some of them are coming from sustainable features. That is a very hard problem, designing your products with multidimensional quality, with customers who have different priorities. Because not all customers care for sustainability. Some of them are just not willing to pay anything for sustainable attributes. And that is a function of their disposable income as well as their preference. So customers who basically don't have any disposable income are not going to pay for sustainable features. And then customers who are heterogeneous in how much they're willing to pay. That's the different shades of green, right? So some customers value fair trade a lot, others value it less. So we have segmentation and heterogeneity within that segmentation. On top of that, sustainability features are new. When we enter the market, we don't know how the customer is going to react, so we don't really know how much these heterogeneous consumers are willing to pay. So we can have a low valuation scenario and a high valuation scenario. So we have segmentation, uncertainty, and heterogeneity. When I started working on this a few years ago, there was no model of how to make decisions with all of these features. And that's what our work is, to advise the product line decision of a company in this environment. What we find is, when we think of segmentation, the classical view is you either offer different products to different customers or not. With the valuation of certainty of the consumer, that's no longer a sufficient representation of segmentation. We also want to think about contingency. To what extent the firm is responsive to the market valuation realization. Do they plan differently if the valuation realization is high versus if it is low? So having segmentation, both differentiation and contingency dimensions, is a much wider range of possible strategy for the firm. So the firm can say, okay, I'm going to just develop sustainable products or just conventional products. Those are the products without any sustainable features. So that's kind of the status quo, either or. With the valuation uncertainty, there is a whole range of other possible strategies. What do we do in the high valuation? What do we do in the low valuation? Do we bet on most people buying the sustainable product? Do we bet most people buying the conventional product? So that is a whole array of some less sustainable practices where we only sell sustainable product in the high valuation realization, some more sustainable practices where we sell the sustainable product more broadly because the demand is there. And then similarly, if we have food differentiation, we can have different conventional products and different sustainable products designed for the two valuation realizations. So a lot of strategies. And what I want to end up with the biggest insight from our work, is when sustainability initiatives are expensive, so when a company first tries to do these initiatives and overcome a lot of these upfront challenges I talked about, it is an either-or decision. You either develop sustainable products and only sell them, or you stick with the status quo of the conventional product, right? If it's very expensive to do the sustainable initiative. So that is the either-or. That's where I believe we are currently. High upfront investment. These sustainable initiatives are very new. As we move towards lower upfront investment, when sustainable initiatives are cheaper, that's when we're going to see the optimal strategy for firm is actually potentially to mix the different types of products, to develop both sustainable and conventional products. So you can think of that, that's like the hedging argument. If you don't know what the valuation of your customers is going to be, you develop both types, sustainable and conventional products, then you see what happens on the market, and you are prepared for both scenarios. So that is the middle here. So the average willingness to pay for the consumer drives whether we offer differentiated strategy or not, and the uncertainty in the willingness to pay drives contingency. Do we plan differently for different realizations? A very big set of optimal possible strategies, especially once the low upfront cost decreases. So the complexity for making these decisions over time, we just expect to become more difficult as we have more opportunities for these sustainable initiatives. It's all about the interplay between the customer valuation and the upfront investment requirements. So we want to drive the cost of the initiatives down, and we also want to increase how much customers are willing to pay through campaigns for awareness and so forth. We need governance. Because sustainability is intrinsically unobservable to consumers, there have to be a third party that is going to facilitate that flow of information in the supply chain. And then the economies and diseconomies of scale, once we start doing more and more sustainability initiatives, the cost might be going down, right? Once we are in Bangladesh improving the worker monetary compensation, it becomes easier to also improve their working conditions in the factory, the economies of scale argument. The diseconomies of scale argument, it's easier to reduce carbon emissions by 10% than from 0 to 10% than it is from 70 to 8%. So all of these initiatives have very complex dynamic over time, and it's going to become more and more complex to optimize what initiatives to pursue. Awareness, attitude, and psychology of consumers is critical. If the consumer is not willing to pay for it, the firm is not going to do it. Any sustainability initiative that's philosophical or philanthropic is going to fail. It's going to be just a marketing exercise. It's not going to be sustainability initiative, right? So I'm going to finish with just what we can do. What we can do is, first and foremost, we need the governing bodies to allow the information flow about manufacturing practices and product attributes. As individuals, we have dual role, right? We can work on these sustainability initiatives within our organization, and then as consumers, we can also support companies that are involved in such initiatives. So that is the role of consumers, and all of us, thankfully, are consumers of different products. Again, sustainability is a continuum of practices and attributes, so there is a lot to do, and it's easy to do a little bit, so every little bit helps, right? But I firmly believe that our legacy as a generation is going to be to do as much as we possibly can. So I'm going to end with that. Thank you very much.